Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jonathan and this is Mr. Pearson Talks Books. It is the beginning of July, so it is time to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of June. Now June was kind of an interesting month because the first half of the month I was still in school. We had students up until June 12th and then I had to work a couple extra days. Then we went on vacation for a week. And then the last week of June, I was home, just able to hang out around the house. So in the month of June, I read or listened to 13 different books. And I want to run through those and just give you a couple of thoughts on them. The first one up was The Gunslinger by Stephen King. And this is the story of Roland, who is chasing the man in black across the desert. And along the way, he meets some people, and we learn a little bit about his backstory. He meets this young boy named Jake, and Jake Jake lived in another world known as New York City, and eventually Jake and Roland have to part ways, and that was kind of an interesting choice. This book, I'm going to be honest, I was a little disappointed with it. The way that people talk about it, they make it sound like it's the end-all be-all of great books, and I was a little let down. Not to say it wasn't a good book, it just wasn't what maybe my expectations were too high. I ended up reading this book for two reasons. One, it is on my 50 before 50 reading challenge, so I got that book. I was able to put a check mark next to that book. But additionally, this was my reading choice for June on the Range, because it is kind of a fantasy western. Roland is a gunslinger, and so he has six shooters, I guess is a good way to describe it. But overall, I thought it was an okay book. I think my expectations were a little bit high. After that, or concurrently, because The Gunslinger was an audiobook for me, I was also reading Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn. And this book is kind of a prequel book to the Heir of the Empire trilogy. Now, the Heir of the Empire trilogy is a set of books that takes place after the Return of the Jedi story. And it introduces us to a character named Grand Admiral Thrawn. And Outbound Flight is kind of giving a little bit of backstory to Thrawn. And what it is there is a Jedi who wants to take a group of people out beyond the galaxies to find new places for them to live. And so he gets a bunch of ships and they go out. Meanwhile, there is Thrawn, who is part of the Chiss ascendancy, and they are coming into his territory, and he's not a fan of that. And so eventually things come to a head, and there's a little bit of manipulation. Palpatine plays a role in this, and I realize I'm talking a little bit of inside baseball, so if you are not a Star Wars fan, you may not really understand or appreciate what I'm saying. The one flaw I think I had with this is that Obi-Wan and Anakin are in it, but I feel like they're in it just to say they were in it, because they're there, they don't do a whole lot, and then they disappear before any of the action really takes place. But the Outbound Flight, great book, really enjoyed it. It kind of, if you've read the Heir to the Empire trilogy and you were kind of trying to figure out where some of the characters came from, this gives you that particular backstory. After I did that, for Red, White, and June, I listened to a book called Sophia's War by Avi. And this is a book about a girl named Sophia, obviously from the title. And she lives in, I think it's Boston or somewhere in that area during the Revolutionary War. And it opens up with her brother having been captured by the English, and he is taken to prison. And while he's in prison, he dies because of the conditions. And this really radicalizes or pushes Sophia into rebellion against the English. And then she's given the opportunity to work as a serving girl in a general's house. I think it was a general. And while she's working there, she's gathering information and spying for the colonists. And she comes to discover that one of the leading military people, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with my words here, is going to turn over a particular fort to the English. And so she has to figure out how to get that information, because no one will really listen to her. She tried giving it to some people and they wouldn't listen to her. So she's trying to figure out how to get that information to General Washington so that he can deal with this particular threat. Enjoyed it. It was probably a 3.5, 4-star book for me. There were some things that were a little outlandish, particularly for a young lady at that time to be doing. But overall, it was an interesting story. Gave some context and some information to Benedict Arnold and how he ended up trying to become a traitor, more or less. Then I read a book called Sticks and Stones by Gary Schmidt, and this is about a young man who is he died during the I think he was killed by the Spartans, and he is trying to get out of the underworld. He's trying to escape from Hades. And eventually he finds a way to do it. And when he escapes, he finds himself in modern day, I think it's St. Paul, Minnesota, where he meets a friend. And then from there, he's trying to figure out what it's like to live in a world that's completely strange to you, and trying to stay one step ahead of the people or demons, entities, whatever you want to call them, that Hades has sent back to capture him and bring him back. I'm a little mixed on this book. There was some. It's rated, or it's marketed as a middle grade book, but there was some language in there that was a little coarse for middle grade, and there were some other scenes that just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. They were kind of weird in the context of that. I don't know really how I feel on this book. It's not one that I think I can recommend. Some people might like it. It's just not one that I enjoyed or can recommend to people. So we'll leave it at that. After that came the book Whalefall by Daniel Kraus. I have a review of that on my channel. I'll put a link up above my head here, so if you want to check that out, you can. And this book is the story of a young man whose father goes missing. He's out diving, he goes missing, and he decides that the best thing that he can do is go out into the Pacific Ocean and try to find his father's remains. And while he is out swimming looking for his father's remains in the area that he was last seen, he comes in contact with a giant squid, and the giant squid's predator, the sperm whale. Well, one thing leads to another, and some of his equipment ends up tangled up with the squid, which then gets swallowed by the whale. And so our hero finds himself inside the stomach of the whale. And while he's in there, he's reflecting on his life and different things that take place, and trying to figure out a way to get out of the whale so that he's not the second member of his family to disappear like his father did. This was a surprisingly emotional book. Like, I cannot believe how emotional I got reading this book, especially in reflecting on the young man's, he had a very volatile relationship with his dad. And his dad was always pushing him and always trying. He felt like his dad didn't love him because of how hard he was on him. And it come to find out his dad was doing that because he was trying to teach him the things that he would need if he ever ended up in a situation like this. I don't know how he knew he was going to end up in a situation like this, but that's what he was attempting to do. Overall, this was a great book. I absolutely loved it. There is a movie coming out in October, and I am really looking forward to seeing that movie when it comes out. Then I picked up a book called Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. I know this is not a book that I typically would have read, but as I've said many times on here, I am a sucker for a bookmark or a prize or a sticker or anything. If you offer me something to do something, there's a good chance I'm going to do it. Well, this is a story of three siblings who, after their mother passes away, they're at her house and they're cleaning out her things, and they come across a videotape which seems to show her mother and father being involved with the disappearance of one of the neighbor girls. And so now they have to try to figure out what to do about the fact that they think their parents might be murderers. And so it kind of plays out from there. One of the siblings is rich and famous, or not, I don't want to say famous, but he's very wealthy. Another sister is a drug addict from a car accident that she was in. She got hooked on pills. And then the third one's the one that lived at home. And so there's a lot of family dynamics that come up. There's a lot of family secrets. Again, like I said, not typically a book that I would read. Overall, I think I kind of saw the ending coming, like how it all played out. And it was an okay book for what it was. I think one of my coworkers said that I might enjoy it, I might not, and she was right. I also listened to this. I think this is the last audiobook I have on the list here. I listened to a book called With a Vengeance by Riley Sager. I had seen this one at Barnes & Noble and thought I would give it a try. And it's a story of a girl or a lady who invites 6 different people to take a train ride with her. And she's taking them from, I believe, Philadelphia to Chicago. And each one of these 6 people is involved in some way in destroying her family's life. They all were involved in a conspiracy, and so she's going to exact revenge by turning over evidence that she has to the FBI when they get to Chicago. That kind of goes awry when passengers start dying. And so this had a very Agatha Christie, a Murder on the Orient Express feel to it. My only thing is that it seemed to have a twist every couple of minutes. Like this person did something, and then, oh no, then this happened, and then this happened. It was a little too twisty, a little too convoluted at times. So by the time you finally get to the end, you're kind of scratching your head as to who was responsible for who and what and how that thing went down. This was my first Riley Sager book. I've heard good things about that writer, but I don't know if I will pick up another one anytime soon. After that, I did pick up a book by one of my favorite writers, and that is Ironwood by Michael Connelly. This is the second book in the Catalina Island series. And this one had several different mysteries flowing through it. It opens up with a drug bust that goes bad, and turns out that there are multiple people who end up dead as a result of the drug bust. Then there's a backpack that belonged to a hiker that had been. The backpack was just turned in a couple of weeks ago, but the hiker had been missing for about 4 years. So Still, that's his name, Detective Still was working with Renee Ballard, and they're trying to investigate and trying to figure out who exactly was responsible for her death and stop it from happening again. Great book, loved it. There were a few loose ends that didn't get tied up, but I think that they'll probably hopefully be resolved in the next book. I love anything Michael Connelly writes. He's one of my favorites. Then while I was on vacation, I took a couple books with me. First one that I took was The School for Thieves by Peter Burns. This was a book that Barnes & Noble chose as their book of the month. And so I was reading that. This is a story of a boy named Tom who is he's an orphan. He's trying to get away from, they call them the snatchers. They're people who come out and look for orphans and runaways and take them to workhouses. And so Tom is trying to stay out of the workhouse. Well, he gets invited to go be in a school for thieves. That's essentially what it is. And while he's there, he's trained in all of the ways and means and arts of being a thief. And there's a competition that they're involved in. And eventually, there's a giant conspiracy that's going on. And he finds himself caught in the middle of it. This had really strong Harry Potter vibes, and that's a good thing. It was a great book. I understand why they picked it for the Barnes & Noble book. Highly recommend you read it. It was great. There's a sequel coming out in just a few weeks, and I'm really looking forward to it. One of the other books that I read while I was on vacation was The Widow by John Grisham. And I'm going to tell you, I wish I hadn't. I have not had good luck with John Grisham lately. When I was in high school, I read like The Pelican Brief and The Firm and The Client and loved all of those. And lately, it seems like everyone that I read is not great. Now, this book kind of had three different parts. So it's a story of a lawyer, I think his name was Simon, and one day this elderly lady comes in and asks him to write a will. And he comes to find out, she tells him that she's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. So he writes a will for her. And eventually something happens and the widow dies. And Simon finds himself on trial for her murder. There's evidence that would seem to indicate that he was responsible for her death. And, you know, I'm going to tell you, this book, it kind of had three parts. The first part was all about Simon writing the will and then having to deal with the widow. I think her name was Nellie. And just the day-to-day, the lunches and all of this. And honestly, Simon just came off as a jerk. He's going through a divorce and there's just bad stuff going on with his family, and he's just, nobody's likable. Then you get to the second part, the second act, and that's the trial, where Simon was on trial for her murder. And I actually kind of enjoyed that part. I like the ins and outs. And then after that, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say, Simon was found guilty. And then he begins trying to figure out who actually was responsible for the murder. And so that third part, the third part, I was just kind of confused because they introduced a bunch of new people that didn't make sense to the story and why. And then you get to the end and it's just John Grisham doing John Grisham things and talking about the unfairness of the American justice system. And it's just, this was one of those that I read so I could get the bookmark. And honestly, it was a slog to get through. I was so glad when I was finished. This was a reread for me. I read the book I Know What You Did Last Summer by Lois Duncan. I had read it in college after I saw the movie with Freddie Prinze Jr. and I think Jennifer Love Hewitt. Michelle Gellar might have been in it too. The girl who played Buffy, I think she was in it. And anyway, this is a story of four high schoolers. Some of them go on to be in college, but after a night of partying, they accidentally run over a kid. He rode his bike out in front of them. They didn't see it. They hit him with the car, and then rather than going back, they left him for dead. Well, a year later, they're starting to feel a little guilty about it, and they start getting these notes and magazine clippings and phone calls that seem to indicate that somebody knows that they are responsible, and so they have to figure out what to do in regards to that. It's a very short book. It's just a little less than 200 pages. Enjoyed it. Very different than the movie. So if you've seen the movie and you go in to read the book, not at all. I mean, the premise is the same, but the movie is a whole lot bloodier and has a way higher body count than this does. Then on the way home from vacation, I picked up a book called Monsters in the Archives by Carolyn Bix. And this was a nonfiction book. It was about, she was given the job of being the professor of Stephen King, something along those lines. And as a result, she was given access to Stephen King's archive with his first drafts and notes and different things on books that he had written. And so she takes 5 different things. She read, she did Carrie and Pet Sematary and The Shining and Night Shift and Salem's Lot. There we go. Those 5. And looked at how the story went from the beginning, when his first draft, all the way until the end with the final copy. And I have not read, I've read one of those. I've read Carrie, and that was a long time ago. I think I was like 13 or 14 when I read it. So I don't really remember a great deal of it. But I was absolutely fascinated in the way that Carolyn Bix was able to just draw you into her research. And she looked at how different life experiences from Stephen King played into his writing. Like the stories from Night Shift he wrote basically, were based on events and things that had happened in his college life, like the protest and why he was so angry, and his feelings of being a parent, and how Pet Sematary plays into grief and his fear of losing his children and what he would do, or how The Shining is essentially a Shakespearean tragedy. It was fantastic. It was one of my favorite books that I've read so far. And now I want to go. I actually went to the library and checked out The Shining so I can read that. And then the last book that I read, again, another book that I wouldn't necessarily pick up on my own, but it was on a Goodreads list. And that is Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker. And this is a horror haunted house with Japanese mythology thrown in. It's the story of a kid named Lee, who thinks he's responsible for murdering his roommate at college. And so he flees the university. He leaves, tells his father he needed a break, and he goes to Japan where his dad lives with his new girlfriend. And then at the same time in the house, there's a girl named Sen, who is the daughter of one of the last samurai in 1877. And they are both in the same house, just 150 years apart. And they interact with each other, and Lee is trying to find out what happened to his mom. His mom disappeared one day when they were on a trip to Cambodia. And so he's trying to figure out, he thinks that he can talk to Sen, who is a ghost, and she'll help him figure out what happened to his mother. It kind of goes off the rails at the end, and I got to tell you, this book is extremely bloody. There's a lot of blood. It's samurai, obviously, but man, people are getting cut and heads chopped off and all kinds of just gross stuff. And so it was an interesting read, I think is a good way to put it. And then you get to the end, and I'm still scratching my head trying to figure out what happened at the end. But I read it so I could get the bookmark. So there we go. That's why I read them. But those are the 13 books that I read in the month of June. I'm actually surprised, given that it's the end of the school year, how much reading I got done. I guess it helps to be on vacation. When you're at Disney World, there's a lot of time to read when you're on the bus. There's a lot of time while you're waiting in line, and there's a lot of time to read while you're on the plane. So, had plenty of time to do all of that. But like I said, those are the 13 books that I read. Some of them were excellent. Some of them I really wish I hadn't read, but it is what it is. That's kind of how reading life goes. So let me know down in the comments, what was your favorite book that you read in the month of June? And if you have read any of the books that I mentioned here on the list, if you made it this far, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you agree with my assessment of those books, or do you think I'm off base? Let me know down in the comments, because I love to hear from you. I'm going to put some videos up here at the end. One will be a link to my 50 before 50 list, so you can see the books that are on there. And I will also put a link to my review of Whalefall by Daniel Kraus. Excellent book. Think you should read it. And as always, my name is Jonathan. This is Mr. Pearson Talks Books, and I'll see you in the next video.